We are at 2 lines from the bottom of Samach Tesam and Beis. Amarav. We're still continuing with the discussion of what a person sells along with the field. So Amarav, Kol she'olim loy b'chevel havishir, Kol she'olim loy b'chevel loy havishir. So any Kol she'olim means any tree that you go up using a rope. So this is something that I'm picturing in my head. So I'm just going to share my picture in my head. If you want to, we're talking about palm trees. So they have no branches. So you do is you take like a rope and you tie it to you and you go around the tree and then you lean back and it holds you up and then you push up a little bit and then the rope catches you again and you use the rope to go up the tree. I was just like trying to think, how else would you use a rope to go up a tree? I think that's the way you do it. Like you wrap it around the tree and you use that to hold yourself up and you pull yourself up. So any tree that you would go up that's high enough that you need a rope to help you go up it, I shouldn't say any tree. We're talking about a decal. A decal tree is a kind of tree that we said is very valuable. So that's considered to be leftover. That's not sold with the property, but a tree that you don't need a rope, you don't keep. But the yani gaila amikosha oil kafshe lehavishir. So anything that's too small that it doesn't need a rope, it's not so chashav, so it goes along with the field. So the yani gaila kosha oil kafshe lehavishir. They say anything that when the ox is pulling the yoke under the tree, they used to prepare the ground by that. So if the ox would just like run over the tree and he wouldn't even notice it, that's not leftover. It's included in the sale when you sell your field. And kol she'ena oil kafshe havishir. It's like more of a light pligi. And these two, even though we gave two different standards, if it's high enough for you to need a rope to climb it, and whether an ox can just trample over it without noticing, whether it's too small to be separated, sold separately from the tree, from the field, it's not really a machlekes. Haba dikli, haba ilni. The first one that we said about going up using a rope, that's talking about a decal. A decal is a long, thin trunk, and without a rope, you can't climb it. But a regular tree, like we have, you just use the branches to climb up. So a rope is not really a relevant consideration. So that you measure by the oxen being able to knock it down.
So if the trees are not sold with the field, so they would uproot the tree and transfer it to another field and replant?
No, it still belongs to the one that's bigger. The bigger trees,
right? The bigger tree, yeah.
It belongs. We've had a bunch of times that a person can sell a tree separately. You could own the whole field, but the seller retains that tree. We had before also. What happens with the roots where you own a tree in a different person's land?
Right.
Who's responsible?
So the original owner gets like a dollar damas around it.
I seem to remember that he was given on certain types of trees. He was given a certain amount of area. I think it might have been Dalit Amos, because he has to work underneath the tree. He has to like, depending on what kind. Some kind of trees like a reman, he had to be able to harvest it, so he needed room underneath it to harvest.
Right.
But I seem to remember we had that back in Cheskes Sabatim.
Right. Exactly, and plus an easement, I guess, to get to it.
Oh, so an easement, that was a whole different question. Right? That was ba'ayin raya, meichel, or ba'ayin yaf. It depends who sold who. Depends. Well, first we had a machlekes generally. If someone sells something, does he sell with everything you need with it? And so it depends. Was it someone who owned the field, sold the tree, or was it someone who owned the field, sold the field, and kept the tree? And then it's going to depend on when he sold it. Did he mean to sell it with everything you need for what you're buying. If it's a matana, we say there's a whole bunch of rules about what happens with the easement to get to it. We've seen such a thing that you could sell something. You could sell, let's say, an inner apartment, and there's no way to get to it, and then the person who bought that inner apartment has to negotiate with the guy on the outside to get an easement to go through, even though his apartment is worthless without it. If someone sold a field and he said, I'm selling it except for this carob tree, except for this sycamore tree. Like we said before, these are considered to be chashiva trees. And even if you sold generally an orchard with a bunch of different trees, these would be excluded because of how distinguished and how valuable they are. So they wouldn't be included anyway. And this guy said this specific fruv tree or sadna or sycamore tree, I'm excluding. Ma, do we say, let's say Reuven was the one, Reuven was selling a orchard, and it had a bunch of charuv trees, it had a bunch of carob trees. And he said, I don't want to sell, I'm selling you this field, but I'm not selling this particular carob tree. Do we say he made his position worse? Because he said, I'm not selling this carob tree, but the intimation, the inference of that is that the other carob trees I am selling. Do we say, no, just like when he said, he's just saying this particular one, I'm very attached to this one. I want to make sure that everyone understands that this one is not being sold. But he certainly didn't mean to sell his other carob trees either, because that's generally the din, that when you sell an orchard, you don't sell the carob trees. Amalei loikan. He said, no, he didn't sell any of them. He was just pointing out a specific one that he didn't want to sell. But he really, of course, was not giving up any of his rights. Esrei, chutz mi chruv ploni, chutz mi sad and ploni loikana. The Gemara asks, the Brisa says, if someone said, it sounds like exactly this case. If someone said, I'm excluding this particular sycamore tree or this particular chruv tree, you're not kinda. My love, it sounds like it's saying just that one that he said that he excluded is not kani, but the rest of them are. No, the truth is that all of them he was not kani. Teda, do you amalei shadim mechurlach chutz misad the plainis? Ehidolei kani achronisa kani. I'll bring you a raya, because if he said, I'm selling you my field except for this particular, I'm selling you all my fields except for this particular field. I'm sorry, no, I shouldn't say that. I'm selling you field A, and I'm excluding field B. Would we say that if Reuven said, I'm selling field A, but I'm not selling field B, would you say field C therefore is sold to Shimon? Of course not. You don't say because I excluded a second field, that means whatever other fields I have are sold. Elamai, you said, so the way you say you're not kind of, you don't include something that wouldn't have been sold anyway because he specified something is not sold. So too over here, he's not kind of. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, my laptop wasn't plugged in. It was about to die. Okay, so that's the Gemara's teretz on this kasha. This is really the same Gemara, but it's a slightly different question, right? The first question was, if someone said, I'm selling you, the rule is that when someone sells an orchard, he doesn't include, let's say, the charuv trees and the sycamore trees. And this person said, the first question was, he said, I'm not selling you one of my charuv trees. We paskin that it doesn't, our question was, does it mean to say that, but I am selling you the rest of them? Or do we mean to say he just wanted to pick out one to say he's not selling? Now we're going to ask a slightly different question. If he said, I'm only selling you half of the value of this charuv tree. Chutz mechatzi sadin plan, you half of this sycamore tree. Mao, shachru and vadelekan. Certainly the rest of the charuv trees are not, he's not kind of, because those he's not coming to accept and say that the other trees are so. But the other half of this charuv, if he wouldn't have said anything, the charuv tree would have remained by him. And he said, I'm retaining for myself half of it. Do we say, since it's only a half, do we say clearly he means to say that the other half is being sold? Or do we say, no, he was picking on half of it because he wants to make sure that that he gets to keep at least of it. At least he gets some of it. But he really wants to get the other half. He wants to keep the other half as well. Amalei like Kani. He said, he's not Kani. The Gemara asks the exact same question like we asked before. Chutz michatzi charuv pliny, chutz michatzi san pliny, shah charuvim like Kana. He's not kind of the rest of the charuv. Ma'alav shah charuvim like Kana. Hamash shai ba'isuk charuv Kana. But the Mashmai says the other half of that charuv, it certainly sounds like that he was admitting that he's selling. Amalei I feel Hamash shai ba'isuk charuv nami like Kana. Teida dilu amalei shadei mechurla chutz michatzi sada pliny. If someone says, I'm selling you this sada, and I'm selling you sada A, but I'm not selling you half of sada B. Does that mean that he's been kind to him the second half of sada B? All he said is, I'm selling you sada A, and I'm not selling you half of sada B. Whatever reason that he said this nonsense that he's not selling him sada B, but there was no discussion of selling the other part of sada B. It's the same thing over here. Now the Gemara takes a total left turn and talks about a totally different discussion that we've been talking about in Amaychras Abayis until now. Just because, if you remember, at the top of the Yom we mentioned Dainei Goyla, the judges in the Goyla. So now we're going to bring another sugya that mentions them. Someone who gives let's say Ruvain, borrows a tea kettle from Shimon, and he gives Shimon a star that says, I owe you a tea kettle. Shimon goes, where's my tea kettle? And Reuben says to him, I already returned it to you. Mao. And Shimon presents, he has a star that says that that he lent Reuven a tea kettle. And normally when you lend something to someone with a star, when the person returns it, they say, okay, if I give you back what I borrowed from you, you have to give me the star, so you can't be governed from me. That's how you prove that it was paid. Mao. So the question is, what do you do in this case? Reuven could have, instead of saying that I returned the tea kettle, he could have said that it got destroyed. He's a shimer. He was borrowing his tea kettle, but actually we should say he wasn't borrowing it. He was watching it, let's say, for Shimon. So then he'd be potter if it was Nensu. If he's a borrower, then he'd be chayv Nensu. But let's say he was a shimer. He was watching it for Shimon, and he could have said that it was Nensu instead of saying that it was returned. Hashtanami Mehem. Do you say he has a migu? I could have said that it was returned with Nensu, so I should also be linked. Or can Shimon say? Can Shimon say to Reuven, you're claiming that you returned it. You're saying you have a migu that you could have said that it was Nensu. Well, a migu b'makam edim is not believed, and maybe this has the status of like a migu b'makam edim, because it's such an unusual thing for someone to return an object and not ask for the star back. And you're saying that you want to be believed that you returned it and you didn't take the star. But you can't use a migu connected edus. Maybe the fact that no one would ever return something without asking for the star back has the status of edus. So you're trying to make this logical proof that you're telling the truth, but that logical proof cannot overcome the presumption that no one would return something without asking for the star. And Shimon says, I have the star. So that's the question. Zok Gemara, the lay malay. So Rav Amram said back to Rav Chizda, the lay malay shtarcha biyadei my body. Rav Chizda is saying, I'm sorry, Amalei Mehemen. So Rav Chizda said the borrower is believed with his migu. he doesn't have to pay he doesn't have to return the tea kettle, he doesn't have to pay for the tea kettle. His migu is believed. We don't say it's a migu b'makom ein. In fact, the Marvel my boy. Why doesn't he talk up? Why isn't that a good taina? Why can't Shimon say, I want back my tea kettle, and don't say it's returned because I have a star and you're trying to use a migu to overcome the presumption that I have a star. He said to him, well, listen, you want to say it shouldn't be believed because of shtar b'yadi my boy, but had he claimed nensu, certainly then he wouldn't have to produce a star. That's when if Reuven's watching something and an oinus happens to it, and he says there's an oinus, all he has to do is make a shvua that it was nensu, but he doesn't have to produce the star. He wouldn't get back the star because of nensu. It's nothing to do with it. So Dr. Gemara Amalei, Saif ki Amalei nensu lav shvua boy. Fact the Gemara. So listen. So let's say you're believing. Rav Amnon says to Rav Chizda, you're believing him with this taina, in spite of the fact that it doesn't have a star. But it's all a taina that he could have said when he says Zati, he could have said nensu. But if he would have said nensu, he would have been required to make a shvua. So how could he use a migu to make himself in a better position? You can never say a migu that I could have said something that's harder. So you tried to say a migu that I could have said nensu. If you would have said nensu, you would have to make a shvua. Now you're not making a shvua. So how could you be believed to say Zati if you would have had to say nensu? You'd be stuck with a shvua. So Gemara, hachanami, my name and name and b'shvua. Chizah says, Eidachanami. He is believed, but he's only believed, even with the migu, he has to make a shvua that it wasn't nensu. So this question of whether we say someone who has a pikadon and claims that he returned it, and the lender has the star, whether he's believed to say he's returned it with the migu that he could have said it was nensu. Let's say it's a machlekes of these tanoim, the Tanya. Now, this is very interesting because the Gemara is going to say this is a machlekes of the Dayani Goyal and Dayani Eretz Yisrael, who are not tanoim. They were clearly Bava and Eretz Yisrael was in the time of the Amoraim. So all of the Mefarshim say that you change it. I think it could mean sometimes, very often Amoraim bring that they supported their shitas based on what the Tanoim said. So maybe these Hani Tanoim, meaning what these Amoraim said, they were saying b'shem Tanoim. But in any case, let's say this machlekes that we just said between Rav Amram and Rav Chizda is a machlekes that was seen before. Shtar kis hayotza ali yisayim. I know some people this might be a bad. It might not bring back good memories. But if you remember back from Ezu Neshech, we discussed at great length the concept of an iska, where there was a managing partner and investing partner. Reuven, let's say Shimon was the investing partner. He gave $100. Shimon gave $100 to Reuven, and Reuven was going to be active and go take that money and invest. And we said that's considered to be they split the profits, and on the half that so we say that Reuven has to compensate. Reuven has to compensate Shimon for half of the losses, and the way we looked at it was Reuven half of the money, $50, is considered that Shimon still owns that money, and it's just a pikadon by Reuven. The other half is a loan to Reuven, and then Reuven is going to invest the money on his own behalf, and he just owes the money back to Shimon. But it doesn't make a difference whether Reuven's not taking, he's not going to be responsible for the losses on the part that still is a pikadon from Shimon. So Zaktugma, if you have such a star, so Reuven had such a deal with Shimon. Shimon gave him $100 to invest, where $50 was a loan and $50 was a pikadon, was a deposit. And then Reuven died, and Shimon has the star that says that I gave $100 for Reuven to invest. The Dayani Goyva say that Shimon makes a shvua and he gets the whole thing. But the Dayani Eretz Yisrael Amri Nishba v'Goyva Mechza. The Dayan Eretz Yisrael, so you only get half of it with a shvua. Everyone holds like Nahardoi. The army Nahardoi, we had this back above Metzia. High Iska, this type of investment, Palva Milgo, Palva Milva, Palga Pikadon. Half of it, half of the money, like we said in our example, where Shimon lent the money, where Shimon gave the $100 to Reuben, half of it is still considered to be, let's say the first part, Palga Milva, half of the money, the $50, is a loan that Shimon made to Reuben, and Reuben is investing on his own behalf, and he's going to be working to make money on that $50, and he's going to keep half of the, he's going to keep whatever profits are produced from that half. But if that money gets lost, he has to pay back Shimon regardless because he borrowed the money. The loan has nothing to do with this business venture. It's because of it's for him to invest, but he owes the money regardless of what happens with the business. Upalga Pikatan, but the other half is considered that Shimon had 50 of his own dollars that Reuben is investing on his behalf. Zakti Gemara, my lab hakam ifli. Is this not what the machlek is about? The question is certainly on the milva part. He can be gaiva, Shimon could be gaiva with a shvua that half. But the question is on the other part, the part's to be kadden. So this part of bikadden really exactly mimics the machlekes Rav Ami and Rav Chizda. That's a bikadden that Shimon gave to Reuven, and the question is, he has a star. Could Reuven have said, I gave it back to you? So with the Miga, they could have said it was Nenson. And we make that taina on behalf of the assignment. And so l'chayra, this machlekes is the same as the machlekes Rami and L'chizda. No, the truth is everyone holds up Rav Chizda who says that the shomer is believed with the migu, even though it's against the star. Over here, because we're talking about Yisaimim, the Yisaimim saying they don't know what happened. But if the father had already paid back the money, we're saying we should tie in on behalf of the children that it was paid back. But the father would have told the children. Such a thing, it certainly would have come up in conversation. So it's unlikely that this is true. So for us to make a tie on behalf of the Yisaimim of something that's not true, that far we don't go. The other Mandamar, the Mandamar who says that they are believed and they only have to pay back half, that they only Eretz Yisrael, they say no, it was the father did pay back, but he never got a chance to tell them because he died before he had a chance to tell them. So it's not so unreasonable for us to tie on behalf of the father that he paid them back. Shalach Rav Huna bar Oven, Hamafkid Eitzel Chaver B'Shtar, V'Amalei Chzartach, Never. We believe him. So he's saying we do. He would paskin like Rav Chizda that we believe that it was returned, even though there's a star. We believe him with a miga. But he says that by a star kiss, you pay the Yisayim have to pay the whole thing. We don't believe them when we don't tie on their behalf that it was Harati. Tarti. Very strange. The Gemara, we just explained the chiluk between the case of Yisaimim and the general din of a star, and now the Gemara is asking it as if we didn't just answer this. That l'chayr these two sheets are stira. So Gemara shani hasan the parim meimer hava amar. Like we said, he holds that the father would have told the children that it was already paid back. So therefore, we don't tiny that on their behalf. Rava Amar, Rava says Hilchanish b'v'goyda mechza. Rava Paskins like the Dayan Eretz Yisrael that we are machalik, that even though we paskin like Rav Chizda that we believe the Shaimer, we are not goiva the other half. We don't make this taina on behalf of Yisrael. Amar Mazutra Hilchasa Kadayani Goyla. These are the halachas like Dayan Goyla that they're not that the lender can be goiva the entire thing, and we don't make we taina even on behalf of Yisrael. What about that which Rava said you only take half? Why are you saying that we paskin like Dayani Goyla, which is not like that? He says, no, I'm paskin like Rava. I just had that the Yanigaila were the one who said that you pay mechza, and the Yani Yisrael were the one who paid the whole thing. I really pass on like Rav. I just had the shittas the other way around. Okay, we'll stop over here. Yashakayach. It's nice to do a little bit different back to